Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Karina Vetrano and Chanel Lewis. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Karina Ann Vetrano was born on July 12, 1986, and lived in Queens, New York. She was raised by her father, Phil, and her mother, Kathy. Phil was a retired New York City firefighter. The family lived in the Howard Beach neighborhood of Queens, which is a predominantly white area with a large Italian-American population. It is home to many New York City civil servants, like police, fire, sanitation, and transit workers. Karina went to college and earned a master's degree in speech pathology. She worked in Manhattan, helping children who had autism spectrum disorder. Karina wanted to be a writer someday. Now moving to the other key player in this case, Chanel Lewis was born on May 2, 1996, and lived with his mother and his sister in the East New York neighborhood of Brooklyn, which is right next to the Howard Beach neighborhood of Queens. He was the son of Jamaican immigrants. East New York is a predominantly black neighborhood. It has a high concentration of public housing projects and homeless shelters. Chanel was intellectually disabled and graduated from a high school for students with emotional and behavioral problems. He was unemployed and had a history of negative interactions with law enforcement, but he did not have a criminal record. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On August 2, 2016, Karina Vetrano decided to go for a run in Spring Creek Park. This is a public park between Howard Beach and East New York. Built near old landfills, this neglected park has overgrown vegetation, a poorly maintained trail, and a lot of mosquitoes. Karina entered the park sometime around 5 p.m. Her father, Phil, tried to reach her about 20 minutes later, based on what he called intuition, but he was unsuccessful. Phil contacted the police, and a search was initiated. At about 10:45 p.m., Phil found his daughter's body in Spring Creek Park. He attributed this to intuition as well. Karina was 15 feet off the trail, face down, and partially naked. She had scratches and bruises on her right leg and a handprint on her neck. Her cell phone was found 30 feet away in the weeds. Karina's cause of death was strangulation. The police believe that someone had approached her from behind with a rock and struck her in the back of the head. This led to a brutal and ferocious struggle. Karina had a chipped tooth, and she had grass in her hands. The perpetrator had conducted an assault of a sexual nature against her. DNA was found under her fingernails, on her back, and on her cell phone. The police searched for the DNA in local and national databases, but they did not find a match. Early in the investigation, the police determined that Karina's father, Phil, was not involved in her death. The police assumed that the DNA belonged to the killer. Phenotyping revealed that the contributor was a black male. The police started a campaign to collect DNA samples from black men in the area, but there were still no matches. Later, a New York City police lieutenant named John Russo, who lived in Howard Beach, remembered something that was helpful to the investigation. About 2 months before the murder, he had spotted a young black man in Howard Beach. The man was wearing a hoodie and a tracksuit, even though it was hot outside. He was going in and out of yards, as if he was thinking about committing a burglary. John followed the man for about an hour before calling 911 and reporting him for suspicious activity. By the time the officers arrived, the man was gone. The next day, another Howard Beach resident called 911 after seeing a black man in the neighborhood. The resident told the operator, "He definitely doesn't belong here." This time, the police caught up with the man and identified him as Chanel Lewis. He explained to the police that he was just looking for a place to eat. Officers drove Chanel to a McDonald's in the Rockaways neighborhood, which was farther away from his home than Howard Beach. On February 2, 2017, 6 months after Karina's murder, the police approached Chanel Lewis and asked him for his DNA, which he provided. It matched the DNA found on Karina's back and on her cell phone. The police also claimed that it matched the DNA under her fingernails, but that wasn't true. Rather, Chanel could not be excluded as a contributor. On February 4, the police arrested Chanel Lewis. Early the next morning, February 5, Chanel confessed to Karina's murder. Here's what he told the police. Chanel became aggravated at his home because a man was playing music outside. Wanting to have peace and quiet, he walked to Spring Creek Park, but he was still mad. He saw a woman running toward him and just lost it. Chanel said, "I beat her to let my emotions out. I never really meant to hurt her. It just happened." He explained how he struck Karina 5 times and strangled her. She then fell into a puddle of water and drowned. Chanel Lewis was charged with murder. His trial started on November 5, 2018. On November 20 of that year, a mistrial was declared. The jury was split. 7 members wanted to convict him, 5 wanted to acquit. In March 2019, Chanel Lewis went on trial for the second time. This jury felt differently about the case than the first jury. On April 1, 2019, Chanel was found guilty on 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree murder, and 1 count of sexual abuse. On April 23 of that year, he was sentenced to a term of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now moving to my analysis. Chanel Lewis maintains his innocence, and he has a staggering number of supporters who vigorously argue that he was convicted due to racism. His first trial ended in a mistrial, and even though he was convicted at his second trial, some of the jurors had allegedly engaged in misconduct. Many people do not have confidence in the verdict. The state, of course, disagrees. They argue that the evidence was overwhelming. They had DNA and a confession. What more did people want? This case should not have been considered a mystery. This brings me to the question, was Chanel Lewis guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that he was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Chanel did not have a criminal record, but he did not always follow the rules. In 2013, he received 3 summons, 1 for urinating in public and 2 for violating the rules of Spring Creek Park. One time when Chanel was in school, he asked a teacher if he could bring a knife because he wanted to kill all the girls. Chanel's mother said that on the night of the murder, he returned home with torn clothes and appeared to be disheveled. He told his mother that he had been attacked by a group of men, but there is no evidence to support this claim. On the next day, Chanel's father took him to an emergency room to get treated for scratches and cuts to his upper body. He also had an injury to his hand. The physician who treated him removed something from his hand which looked like a tooth. Karina had a chipped tooth. Prior to his arrest, Chanel made a number of curious searches on the internet. For example, Miranda warning, double jeopardy clause, due process clause, administration of justice, indictment, plea bargain, prosecutorial discretion. Are there limits to prosecutorial discretion? What is prosecution? What do prosecutors do? And what is DNA? In addition, Chanel searched for just about every amendment to the U.S. Constitution, including the Fifth Amendment, and visited websites about genetic genealogy and the sacrament of penance. The day after Chanel Lewis was arrested, he confessed to the murder. He described a puddle of water which was near Karina's body. Chanel's DNA was found on Karina's back and on her cell phone. Now moving to the exculpatory factors. A bottle of Arizona fruit punch was found near Karina's body. It contained DNA that matched someone different than Chanel. The confession Chanel provided may have been coerced. He was first questioned at 6:45 p.m. on the day of his arrest. The police said, "Do you want to answer any questions about the murder?" Chanel responded, "No." They asked him the same question about 2 hours later. He said, "I don't know nothing about it." About an hour later, he said he wanted to go home. Chanel did not sleep at all that night and confessed at 5:50 a.m. the next morning. Some of the details provided by Chanel are inconsistent with the evidence. For example, he said that Karina was wearing a yellow tank top and claimed that she drowned in a puddle of water. When interviewed by the district attorney, Chanel appeared to believe that he was his lawyer. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I believe that Chanel Lewis was guilty of murder? Yes, in my opinion, he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Even so, this case does raise a number of concerns about how racism could have led to Chanel's conviction. Did the police have the right to stop Chanel, when he was walking in Howard Beach. The basis for that stop was his race, with a resident even telling the 911 operator he definitely doesn't belong here. Did the police have the right to collect DNA from over 100 black men in the area based on phenotyping? Did Chanel really know who he was talking to during his confession? Was his confession coerced? And did the police supply him with information? I think this case is not really about guilt or innocence. Rather, it deals with the integrity and fairness of the process which is used to identify a suspect. That process must be fair, and it may not have been in this instance. In the end, many people probably aren't that worried about it because it's clear that Chanel was actually the killer. They might look at some of the questionable police tactics and say, well, the end justifies the means. Certainly, Chanel is a danger to society, regardless of how that was discovered. It is easy to argue about the system being broken on behalf of someone who may actually be innocent. It is much more difficult when they are guilty. In a just society, everyone is entitled to due process. If the police are rewarded for taking shortcuts and violating rights, they will only become more reckless. They will use someone's actual guilt to justify any investigative tactic needed to uncover that guilt. Those are my thoughts in the case of Karina Vetrano and Chanel Lewis. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Just a reminder that I have over 300 pre-release videos on my Patreon account. These videos are of the same quality as the videos I release to the public. When I put a video in pre-release status, it usually stays there for several months, if not a year. So it's not like I'm putting these videos on Patreon and making them public a few days later. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video.